Okay, please go ahead.
All right, namaskar everyone. And so here is my plan. I will give a monologue for say 45 to 50 minutes. That way I want to leave sufficient time for interaction, questions, comments, and objections. Okay, that's how we learn. So I will start sharing my file. Okay, all right. So Hindu history and historical evolution in human history. And then you see the three words there, ancient, medieval, and modern. Even right there in the title, we have this package from the Western Indology, Western sense of history, and of course, the Western view of Indian history. So we have to analyze it and then accept what makes sense and reject what does not make sense. Now, do you have, when I say you, I mean each one of us, we as a civilization, we as individuals, part of civilization, do we have enough of what it takes to understand this history? And the framework that I am using, I love to use frameworks. Here I'm using a specific framework that is for learning purposes. It comes from our all ancient Indian narratives. It comes from our darshana system. And of course, it also comes from Bhagavad Gita. You will find all these words there: Shraddha, Samshaya, and Jidnyasa. And what is required is a very potent combination of these three. Okay, any one is not sufficient. So to quickly give you a feel for what I'm referring to by this framework, imagine this cube like three-dimensional space, three axes. The first axis is of a Samshaya. And Samshaya is of a two kinds. Okay, it goes from one extreme of a Samshaya of a mind to the other extreme of Samshaya of a buddhi. For example, in Bhagavad Gita, if you remember or if you have heard the word Samshayatma Vinashyati, and I'm going to show you that verse in a second, that Samshaya leads to complete destruction. That Samshaya that Krishna is referring to is a Samshaya of a mind. But Samshaya of a buddhi is very much encouraged, that you will find in all darshana system. For example, Prameya, Prayojana, Samshaya, Drushtanta, Siddhanta, Avayava, Tarka, Nirnaya, Vada, etc. If you hear the 16 elements of Nyaya Darshana, that Samshaya, it says it's such a wonderful concept. You must understand everything about it, why it exists, and how to make use of it. The other axis, and so this leads to, if you use the Samshaya of a buddhi, like devil's advocate, why somebody is saying like this? Why should I trust this information? What is the evidence? And is that evidence something objective? Is that evidence empirical? Is that something objectively testable? Okay. Is this something revolutionary evidence? Just not a one more data point. And that can lead to a satisfaction, the jnana trupti. The second axis is axis of a Shraddha. Like anytime we start studying, for example, you go to Wikipedia and you start reading something. Now, should you trust that information? You know, it's not always black and white. It's not like you can never trust Wikipedia or you can always trust Wikipedia. How do you make that decision? You need that Shraddha, whether you're reading any book, any piece of information, or just listening to me and listening to my claims. The Shraddha, Bhagavad Gita tells us, goes on the extreme axis from Tamasic Shraddha to Sattvic Shraddha, and it describes its qualities. It describes, same thing for actually Buddhi. Okay, so Shraddha, we can say going from extremely Tamasic to Sattvic Shraddha, and the third that leads to Karma Shakti. That having a faith, having conviction, having trust, having reverence, that leads to a lot of Karma Shakti. I'm not talking of good or bad, but it leads to a lot of Karma Shakti. We should harvest it, okay, in the right direction. And therefore, we have this axis of a Samshaya and the last axis of a Jidnyasa. Jidnyasa is in a sense of a curiosity. But actually, it is more than a curiosity. Like in Krishna, again in Bhagavad Gita, as I said, these words are from Bhagavad Gita. In describing the different types of devotee, Krishna describes Artha Jidnyasu, Artharthi, Jnani cha Bharatarshava. 4 types of devotees, and they are all great. They have a different temperament. One of them is a Jidnyasa, okay, that curious, but it is not a ordinary curiosity. Just in the previous lecture, and I did join for a few minutes, Vishal Agarwal ji, just mentioned Vachaspati Mishra, right, naming his commentary on the Darshana, Bhamati. Okay. In that Bhamati, he mentions Vachaspati Mishra. He says, your doubt or your curiosity needs to be not just casual curiosity. I just want to know, can you tell me this? No, no, no. It has to be saprayojana. And also on the Sanshaya axis, he says Sandigdha. Saprayojan and Sandigdha, meaning that has arrived due to a individual person's tapasya. He or she has taken effort to learn, effort to understand everything they can on their own, like a swadhyaya. And then when they don't understand something, that is when they are going to someone else and posing that as a meaningful question or as a meaningful doubt. So saprayojana, sandigdha. Okay, so those are the 3 axes. And that jidnyasa, if satisfied, not by somebody else doing it for you, but your own effort, it leads to phalaprapti. All right. Okay. If you go to say Patanjali, he uses the word again. You can see how they fit here. He talks of swadhyaya. You cannot outsource meditation. You cannot outsource dhyan. That's something you must do in order to gain the benefits of it. Swadhyaya, then he talks about Shraddha, Ishvara Pranidhan, and he also uses the word tapasya. Or if you go to Bhagavad-Gita, you'll see many parallel words. So what it is saying is, if you look at the lower left-hand corner, a tamasic Shraddha, a samshaya of a mind, or a jidnyasa only in the sense of a kutuhal. Now, kutuhal can be just curiosity, but I'm going to use this here in the sense of idle curiosity. Like there is no point, say for example, I'm looking out through the window of my study, and there is a tree now, not many leaves. And it may be perfectly, somebody may think it's perfectly all right to know how many branches are on that tree. Well, I mean, that's a very legitimate question. My point is, it's an idle curiosity. Unless there is a context, there is no point somebody wanting to know how many branches are there, okay? And that's what I mean is not very useful. So if you have that combination, it leads to that Sanshayatma Vinashyati, and Krishna will say that actually in a minute here, I'll show you. Our objective is to go to the extreme right-hand corner, that is the prosperity, that's Abhyuday, prosperity in every single way. Now, Krishna uses Tadvidi, Pranipatena, Pariprashnena, Sevaya, Upadekshantite, Jnanam, Jnanina, Sattvadarshina. I'm just giving you the framework, how we are going to understand this history. So, asking a very useful, interesting, potent, sandigdha, meaningful question is very, very important. That's how we learn. Pranipata, having that Shraddha. Now, what I mean by that is, that doesn't mean you don't question. Actually, therefore, the Sanshaya is there. We should question something. But one should develop a keen sense of when to trust something and when to doubt something. Okay. Many times what you will find at the people do the exactly opposite. They doubt something when they should trust, and vice versa. Okay. And of course, somebody has to put some effort of your own, either as a tapasya, seva, so on, to get to the outcome. Okay. Or it's a shraddhavan labate jnanam. Okay. Without shraddha, nothing is possible. Okay. And adnyascha, ashraddhadhanascha, sanshayatma vinashyati. You can see those all points of the 3 axes here. Okay, I'll go fast through that. And remember, people, when we have to learn some new thing, it never feels easy. That's very normal. Okay, but if you feel a tough resistance, but you still desire to learn about it, like exercise, doing exercise, know that you are on the right track. Krishna says, Yattad agre vishamiva pariname amrutopamam tat sukham satvikam proktam atma buddhi prasadajam. Something that feels like a poison at the beginning, but like a amrut at the end. Okay, that type of knowledge, okay, that type of insights, which are earned with your own effort, atma buddhi, leads to a very happy, very pleasant state, prasadajam. Okay, I'll quickly skip through this. If we get into question answer, I'll come to those, what are the challenges. But let's get into the history. So, wrong history of Hinduism. Let's begin there. Okay, and Rajivji referred to that. He said, what I'm going to say will not agree with what you would have studied in your textbooks, or if you have children and they are studying right now, whether in India or here, or anywhere around the world, that may not agree. It would not agree. So what I'm referring to as a wrong history of Hinduism is a mainstream and a textbook. I just pulled this slide from Wikipedia. Okay, outline of the South Asian history. It begins with the wrong designation, South Asian. Okay, what is South Asia? And look at what they have highlighted. Essentially, they have highlighted Bharatvarsha. At least one thing they have got it right, partially right, I would say, because they can actually go all the way to Iran and go further north of Afghanistan, and that's also part of India. But for broadly speaking, they have shown the right area of a Bharatvarsha, but they're calling it South Asian history. But you know what? In comparison to what comes next, this is minor. It's a problem, but it's a minor problem. Now look what they're showing as a history. They refer to Paleolithic. We will not go into what that is right now. Neolithic, Chalcolithic, okay, different stages of evolution in terms of human usage of different instruments and whatnot. Going back to that, whatever millions of years. But quickly it comes down to that Chalcolithic and a Bronze Age, Iron Age, 1500 BC. Just pay attention to that. Then the Middle Kingdoms, 200 BC to 1206 AD CE, which is what? Last 1,000 years to 2,000 years. And then that medieval period, okay, 1200 to 1500. Now, who defined that? I'm going to come to that in a minute. Then early modern period, the way they want to define it. And then they say colonial states. You may notice that it also overlaps. Essentially, they have used the model that they tried to build for Western Europe, okay, the Dark Ages, and I'll not go into that. And they tried to force fit on India, on the Indian history. Now, how do they define Indian history? Again, I'm going to take another page from Wikipedia right there. If we just type South Asian history or Indian history or Hindu history, you'll get this. Okay, so it goes into root of Hinduism. I'm going to quickly fast forward and bring you to this corner, point number 7. 7, 8, 9, I don't agree with it. You don't have to agree with it, but something we can relate to. Yes, there was that Islamic rule, Islamic invasions, and things were going downhill. They were exploiting, they were destroying the culture, civilization, we know that. But if you go backwards, like 6, 5, 4, 3, just go to the 3, and it says before 17, or rather until 1750 BCE, 4,000 years ago, until last 4,000 years ago, it was all pre-Vedic, which also means last 4,000 years is all that is Vedic. That's when we had a Rig Veda. That's when we have to have everything that we know about our ancient civilization. And why? Because Wikipedia says so, or the Western Indologists that are filled in all the universities here, all famous named universities, they tell us so, or their lackeys in India. Okay, and you can see the whole communist leftist brigade there. All right. Okay, so that's what is been taught to us, or that is what is available in the public media. Again, just like Vishalji told you, like Manu Smriti, Manu is talking about what the different opinions are, and then he's giving his opinion. I don't want you to confuse that I am saying this, okay? I'm saying this is what the most common view that outsiders have taught us, and we have unfortunately internalized. Okay, even well-meaning Indians have internalized. So please keep that in mind, okay, when you talk to our researchers and our leaders and so on and so forth. Now, something interesting. Now, why did they compress all this? What was the evidence? We'll get to that in a minute. But remember, when they were forming their history, I mean, to be fair to them, let's say for a minute, by them, I mean the Western European historians, they were also thinking of their history not going beyond a certain time. I'm going to show you in a minute. In fact, the geological history of the earth, now this is also deliberately I put from Wikipedia. Now they're talking of last 4,000 million years of geological history of the earth, or last 4,000 million years of the evolutionary history of life. Now, how many of you know that this knowledge that is presented to us as the cutting edge knowledge of the geology and evolutionary history of life did not exist in the Western European psyche 400 years ago? I don't know if you are surprised by that, but until including the time of Kepler and Newton. And frankly, there are books that are printed until 1950s in the Europe, Western Europe and America. You will find the reference to and a conviction, Shraddha, I told you, Shraddha of a tamasi kind, okay, conviction that the whole universe began in 4004 BC or somewhere there. So the whole universe, Earth, everything is only 6,000 years old. That's why I said we can give a benefit of doubt. So with that, if they had tried to compress our history because they were convinced nothing existed before 4000 BC, we can give them some benefit of doubt. The problem is when they change their viewpoint in the light of the developments in cosmology, or in the light of developments in Darwin's evolutionary theory, theory came out, and so on. While they tried to change their history, and they were not successful, frankly, because they don't have any evidence, and we'll come to that, if not in my lecture, in the question answer, hopefully. But while they changed their history, they deliberately, ignorantly kept our history as is, the way they conceived it. Therefore, we are still stuck on the Wikipedia, in the British, on every intellectual, so-called academic discussion with Rigveda in 1500 BC. Okay, I want to get rid of that myth. On the evolutionary side, also notice the different framework that is used. That there was a water, then single cell living entities, okay, and then growing to fungi, and then multicellular life, then amphibians, and so on and so forth. Okay, and this similar thing with the geological life. So understand, because they were stuck in this dogma of the whole creation beginning in 4004 BCE. Now you may laugh at it, but that's what was believed, and even confirmed and verified by likes of Kepler and Newton not that long ago. Okay, 17th century, 16th century. All right. Now against this point, let's look at the context of chronology as what we can understand from our research. Okay, based on our evidence. Okay, so this is what I'm going to show you is a quick one page summary of my 25-30 years of research work that Rajiv ji referred to. Okay, on the time scale, let's begin with today, and we are talking of thousands and thousands of years. So by today, if we said 21st century, that's fine. 21st century plus minus 200 years is also equally fine. 300 years is just fine. That's today. If we go back in time, 0, that is the beginning of that Julian Gregorian calendar, with a reference to supposedly the birth of Jesus, okay, as they understood it. Okay, we'll not get into that discussion because we want to talk about our history. But some of you may know the confusion around that. In fact, the good light humor is around 25th of December. 25th of December was selected for a very different reason. I will not spend time right now. And even one person is said that Jesus was born in 4 AD. So go figure. Okay, that's a humor, but I'll move on. If we go beyond 0, we are talking of that minus 5K refers to so 5000 BC, 10K refers to 10,000 BC, 15,000 BC, and so on. Now, quickly, I'm going to give you some landmark, geographical landmark, and some historical landmark. Okay. Now, this is not all my work, but this is the work that I collect from all peer-reviewed journals. I will tell you exactly where my work is. If we go back in time, okay, and that is also now changing, but we can safely say if you go back to say 100,000 years, 1 lakh years, there was a grand Saraswati. Mahasaraswati was flowing beautifully in India. Okay, just as a safe side, I'm taking like a 70,000 BCE, the timing of Grand Saraswati, and it's flowing, it was flowing then, and it was flowing for a long time after that. Around 50,000 BCE, we have evidence. So if I'm saying something, this has a very empirical, objective, scientific evidence for what I am stating here. Sometime between 50,000 BCE and 40,000 BCE, river Yamuna split from Saraswati and started meeting Ganga. Okay, so that's around that 50,000 to 40,000 BCE. Then LGM, if you have heard that, there's the last glacial maximum kind of set in. It's not like set in one time. It was going on for thousands of years. But essentially what happened, the ocean levels went down in comparison to where they are today. So they were down by 120 to 140 meters below than what they are today. That was because a lot of water was in the form of ice and it was on the land. That is what we hear of North America and Canada, all most of the northern part covered with glaciers. So that time there was a colder climate around the world. That doesn't mean the India was shivering, but it was still colder than in comparison to today. And we have a evidence that shows that the Grand Saraswati kind of became Saraswati, if we can use that word. That's around 20,000 BC, we have evidence. Then 13,000 BC, there is some geological things happening, okay, tectonic shift, whatever it is. And we know suddenly Shatudri or Satluj, which also fed its water to Saraswati, sharply turned westward near Ropar or Rupanagar in Punjab, if those of you who have been there. And it sharply turned westward and then now started, instead of going south, meeting Saraswati or becoming a part of Saraswati, it turned sharp west, went towards other rivers of Punjab, and then eventually to Sindhu and so on. Okay, why is this important? Because all this evidence beautifully matches with the descriptions of rivers that we have in Rig Veda, we have in Ramayana, and we have in Mahabharata, if we look at this time. So that's where my work comes in. Also, the Grand Sindhu becoming the grandest river rather than Saraswati, and that those description comes in Rig Veda, for example. Okay, and then finally we do know that sometime after 4500 BCE, Saraswati became dry and finally disappeared. Okay, so as a just a extremely conservative limit, 2000 BCE for river Saraswati. Against this river framework, if I can use that, right? Okay, the lifeline, the river is a lifeline. What I did, again, I didn't know any of this. I started with Mahabharata text with one very specific enigmatic observation that people thought, Mahabharata researchers thought, impossible in the very order of nature. I started with that one observation. I thought I can figure this out over a weekend. Then I was novice. I realized it took me actually 15 years, 15, from 1995 to 2009. Long story short, that one particular observation gave me a wonderful limit, very, very decisive, scientific, as good as scientific as it gets, a limit for the timeline of Mahabharata. That particular observation said it cannot be before 11,000 BC, it cannot be anytime after 4500 BC, and so on. And then I read Mahabharata multiple times, extracted 300 plus unique astronomy observations. And just like you solve a Rubik's Cube or a crossword puzzle, jigsaw puzzle, all those references lead anyone. It led me, but if you get into a little bit of astronomy and Mahabharata, it will also lead you to this one particular year and no other year, 5561 BCE, or just in simple language, more than 7,500 years ago. I did the same thing ditto for Ramayana. In case of Valmiki Ramayana, when I read multiple times, I extracted 600 plus astronomy observations. Again, solving them like a jigsaw puzzle, crossword puzzle, putting this together, and it leads one to a very specific year, 12,209 BC, for the year of Ram Ravan Yuddha. And then using this river evidence that I just described, not so much astronomy evidence at this point, or when I did this work, 2016, I could roughly say for Rig Veda, now this is a rough estimate, that Rig Veda's old portions could be as close as the time of Mahabharata, when Vyasa might have recasted them. There are some references like Grand Sindhu that goes there. But the oldest portions of Rig Veda are definitely more than 22,000 BCE. That is based on these river descriptions. River descriptions from our geological scientific research and river descriptions from Rig Veda. So in effect, we have definitely Hindu civilization, Hindu history for more than 24,000 years. Okay, that's a takeaway for this. Okay, these are the mandalas of Rig Veda. Now, against this Western history writing, a number of you must be familiar, the Aryan invasion nonsense, I call it, but Aryan invasion theory or Aryan migration theory, and now they call it Aryan touristic theory and whatnot, because everything, whatever they claim, is backfires against them. Okay. Now, when did they figure this out? Well, this one, my one of my British consultant friend, he said, who has read my works, he said, Nilesh, you should put a dot there, call it European Enlightenment. So that's when they sat there after 1600, okay, and they started writing history for rest of the world too, okay. And part of that, the bad package they delivered to us was that Aryan invasion nonsense. Okay, but we'll not talk much about that unless until question answer. All right. Now let's get to our ancient, medieval, and modern. Now I want to say that these terms don't really apply to us. What was ancient to them? Until say, for example, the fall of Roman Empire and the time of Jesus, as they perceived it, it was ancient. Medieval meaning essentially the dark ages. Okay, they really don't know what happened, but it was a very, very bad time for Europe. Okay, so think of some, just approximately say from 500 CE to like 1500 CE. I'm giving you crude numbers. And after that, the European Renaissance, if you have heard about it, you know, and then scientific science versus religion, all that fight and whatnot. And then the empirical science took hold, and then that's why they call the modern period. Now, so that's their framework. It really doesn't apply to us. Okay, it's actually dangerous and disaster, just like the left versus right truly doesn't apply to India. So what we may able to use is this. Okay, just to give a comparison. I don't want you to think literally. We can think of a Rigvedic time frame, or actually we can call even a pre-Rigvedic, but I'm simplifying. Then we can talk of Ramayana. We can talk of Mahabharata times. We can then talk of post Mahabharata. Then we have this Maurya, okay, the like Chanakya's time, and then the Guptas. And by the way, it's not to say that there is nothing in between. There are many different dynasties, and we have the list of those dynasties. But again, I'll come back to that. The challenge of those lists in determining our chronological history. And then say last 2000 years, okay, we have many things that we know, okay, in the devotion. And so you have spent some time, so you might know on the devotional side, different acharyas, you know, right, beginning with say Shankara, just a recent last 2000 years, 2000 plus years, we know that history. We know many kings, Vijayanagar empires, the Islamic invasions, Raja Shivaji, Chhatrapati Shivaji, many other warriors who fought against the Islamic invasion. So we know a good deal of that. And then the colonial times, the British times, beginning with say 1700 and so on, 1800. All right. Now, if you want to know the history, we talk of history slightly different. To the Western mind, history, yeah, does include some of these, but mostly it is about the dates. Everything dates, okay, or everything who came after who came after who killed who, and so on, so forth. That is not to say that's not part of what we call history. The word I'm going to introduce, and a number of you would be familiar, is the itihasa. Okay. Now, what is the difference between history and itihas? Again, I would encourage you to go to Wikipedia and read the definition. Even for history, you will not find a good definition. There are many ways people would understand. I would encourage all of you to use the word itihasa. Okay. And now Western people will tell you that India doesn't have a history. Well, they are right and they are also wrong. Okay, some parts of our history, we don't exactly have the very specific dates that we have figured out yet. We will figure them out. We may figure them out. But I would like to say, and this is the response you may use if you feel comfortable, if you feel that Shraddha in what I am saying, is that you say, okay, yeah, you may be right, but you know, guess what? So what? I mean, who cares? Yeah, we may not have a history. We have itihas. And what is itihas? Itihas has history, and itihas has a lot more than a history. There are many definitions of itihas, but I'll just quickly give you one. Dharmartha kama mokshanam upadesham samanvitam purvavrittam kathayuktam itihasam prachakshate. Okay, in order to provide the guidance, okay, upadesha, for what? Dharma, artha, kama, moksha, for purusharthas. When past ancient events are taken as a basis, as a foundation, and when they are told to us in a katha form, katha vruttam, purva vruttam, katha yuktam, in a katha form, that is called itihasa. Okay, and I have given some other talks where I have listed like 10 different things that must be there as a part of itihasa and so on. My point is that chronology aspect that comes from history, yes, it is a part of itihas, and we should definitely focus on that for a simple reason. It allows us to understand our art, our science, our technology, our medicine, our agriculture, our other technologies, our culture, our civilization, our celebrations, our philosophy, tattva, jnana, darshana, our science. Okay, so it's very important to have the context of a time to understand our civilization, understand our dharma. Okay, now you have seen this slide. Okay, now once I decided this defined this, so I started with astronomy for Mahabharata, astronomy for Ramayana, and then hydrology, the river science for Rigveda. That's how I arrived at these dates. But since then, which is I would say after say 2014 or so, I have essentially looked at every single piece of hard science where the evidence exists. If the evidence exists, and therefore it can be empirically tested, each single piece of evidence that I have come across, and just for a sake of it, I have said 1,000 plus, has supported these timelines. No exception. Has always supported these timelines for our itihasa. Both Mahabharata and Ramayana are called itihasa. Okay, and also the Rigveda. Okay, now we have got some problem. Okay, now we cannot necessarily blame the Europeans. For example, you would have heard that at the after Mahabharata, the Kali Yuga began. The time of Mahabharata was that of a Dwapar Yuga, or the interface of Kali Yuga and Dwapar Yuga. If somebody asks you when did Ramayana happen, you will say Treta Yuga. Now those are all correct. In fact, those terms come into Ramayana, and those terms also appear in Mahabharata. So you're not saying anything that is not there. The problem is, then we have created our own Yuga dogma. Sometime it may be because courtesy, thanks to the Western historians, but I don't know the history of this Yuga dogma. What we have done is we have taken this one definition, and I'm going to walk you through this in a minute. It's very important that we get rid of it if we truly want to understand our Hindu history. There is one definition that I'm confident that everyone on this call would be aware of it. For example, Kali Yuga is, the length of Kali Yuga is a 432,000. Dwapara is a twice that, so 864,000. Treta is a 3 times that of Kali Yuga, and Satya or Krita Yuga is 4 times that of Kali Yuga. You would have heard that. If you add this together, it comes to 4.32 million years. Please remember that number. Okay. What we do is we try to take these timelines and try to understand our history, and it's a disaster. And I'm going to tell you why that is a disaster. Okay. Quickly, these are the 3 groups that are right now trying to understand our history, Hindu history. One is the AIT, and I told you, just showed you in the Wikipedia. For them, everything began in the last 4,000 years as far as the Hindu history is concerned. That's a nonsense. You can watch my other talks. I will not address that issue today. Then there is this indie group, and I'll call this our group. I will call it our group because their intentions are not bad. Unfortunately, for most part, these people are trained in that same thought process that AIT gave birth to, or what gave birth to AIT. So unfortunately, it's not a very scientific approach, even when they look at the evidence. And majority of those Indic researchers, even the pro-India researchers, are unfortunately stuck in this time frame. Okay, 800 BC to 6000 BC. That can go to 8000 BC. I'm giving you approximate time period. Then we have another group, and again, you would be familiar with it. You may be part of it, and in a way, I'm part of it because that's our heritage, and we feel attached to it. Yuga dogma, I call it again. And so I'm not saying everything that is stated there is a Yuga dogma. I will explain that in a minute. Okay, but we have heard about the Kalpa, Brahma's day, Manvantar, many Manus, and then coming down to these Yugas, Mahayugas, millions of years. Okay, now if we use any of these frameworks to try to understand our Hindu history, we will be disappointed. Okay, that is the takeaway I want you to take. So how do people fall into these groups? Sometimes purely dogma, sometimes they use some stray evidence, opinions, agreements, disagreements. Usually it does not go beyond this. And I want to quickly share a quote of Voltaire on this. Cherish those who seek the truth, but beware of those who find it. Now, this is a problem for Abrahamic religions, or this is a problem for many other cultures who see everything as a black and white. That's not a problem for an Indian mind. It should not be a problem. Okay, we have no problem changing, modifying things in the light of new evidence. Okay, Sanatano Nitya Nutana. We are always willing to refresh ourselves for the time, place, and circumstances. Quickly, the Yuga that I just told you. This is the problem that has happened, and I'm working on this for at least 10-15 years. I never talked about it because I was so much busy with the dating of Ramayana, Mahabharata, and Rigveda. But now that that task is complete, my current task is to take on this yuga problem. Okay, let's look at yuga. As soon as you hear the word yuga, immediately a time comes to your mind, and you are not wrong. Okay, but do you know that there is a time, there is a different types of time? Okay, so timekeeping, if you want to look at it, there is a psychology time and there is a physiological time, at least as far as the ancient Indian narratives are concerned. And of course the space time. Okay, so space time meaning what? Time is something, you know, like 2 hours, 2 minutes, and so on. And space is, if you look at the wall clock, you look at the moment, you know, you look at the moment of the arms, and then you decide how much time has passed. Or you look at the sun's position, you know, rising in the east, and now it is above your head, and you say half the day is gone, right? So it's the moment of something that you use to define the time. In that sense of space time, I'll also give you a few other definitions if we get time. All right, the other axis I want to use is the axis of applicability. So yuga in a simple language means a specific interval of time, or an interval of time. That's all yuga means. But after that, yuga has many different definitions, many. Okay, and so applicability can go from a local contextual application of yuga to a global and universal application of a yuga. So I'm going to give a few names. There is a concept of timekeeping which is psychological or physiological in nature, that is a karma pradhan. The emphasis is on a action. If you look at the space time, the emphasis is on a jnana, the knowledge, understanding what is time, and making use of that time to do other things. Okay, so making use of that time. And if you look at a specific local contextual, it is a very specific context, and I'll explain you what I mean by that. Specific to an individual, specific to an individual culture, specific to an individual situation, whereas global universal is generic. Now I'm going to go a bit fast through it so that I cover a few other subjects. Okay, so cosmological evolution, geological evolution, biological evolution. We looked at the geological evolution of the earth or biological evolution. For that, you may use a time which is on a global scale, and it's not to be used to measure history or who died when or something like this. But if we use that, then there can be a confusion. On the other hand, there are these ancient narratives, like exactly when did the Mahabharata war happen, when did Maurya was on the throne, when was Guptas were on the throne, okay, when did Ramayana happen, when did so and so king ruled. So ancient narration, itihas, chronology, evolution, our calendars, they all fall into one specific type of timekeeping. That's chronological. Quickly, there is also a time in the ancient Indian narratives that talks of cultural evolution, tattvajnan, darshana. Now you're going to be surprised, say, what are you talking? Or even a technological evolution. Okay, it's a philosophical in nature. And there's another type of time that the yuga, when I say time, I mean yuga, that ancient Indian narratives talk about, which are physiological in nature, which are self-social evolutionary in nature, which have an aspect of a statecraft or an administration and the evolution of administration. Okay, surprise, surprise. Quickly, the takeaway I want to tell you is this. The chronological time that we are talking, that is to be used in assigning a chronology to a historical event, out of all the definitions of yuga, only 25%, 1/4, the bottom right hand corner, is where that is applicable. The other types of yuga that are described in our ancient Indian narratives, theoretical, philosophical, or practical, okay, they have nothing, absolutely nothing to do with the chronological time used for history. And that's where we have made a mess out of it. Okay, this is a subject that can go on for 2 days, so I don't want to spend more time on this. Quickly, I'll show you a few other quick examples of this, what I mean by that, so you get some flavor. Cosmological evolution. Remember, I told you just some time ago, 4.32 million years of Mahayuga. That was the number. That number comes from our astronomy text like Surya Siddhanta and Aryabhatiya. And simply those large numbers are used so that as a formula, we can describe the precise and accurate rotational periods of our planets, guys. That's it. It had no other purpose, but that was misunderstood. Somebody borrowed that, taken from the top right hand corner, and tried to apply it to bottom right hand corner, and that's where the disaster began. Okay, all right. Or geological evolution, like in modern times we talk about Cambrian to Pleistocene to Holocene. There are many other stages in between. Or biological evolution, now we talk of the water and the singular monocell living entity, and then turning to fish and then amphibians and whatnot. Quickly look at our biological evolution in the sense of Vishnu's avatar as a metaphor. Vishnu's avatar can be understood in 10 different ways, but one is simply thinking of a fish, Matsya, Kurma, Varaha, Nrusimha, and so on. So what? Matsya is a fish in the water, Kurma is an amphibian, right? Varaha is still related to water and a mud, but just getting evolved. And then Narasimha, the lion, and so on. You can understand that as a metaphor if you choose to. All right. Let's quickly look at this one is easy. We are talking of Mahabharata, Ramayana, and Maurya and Gupta and whatnot. Okay. The philosophical one. What if I tell you in Aitreya Brahmana, the definition of 4 yugas is given like this. If you are sleeping, you are in Kali Yuga. If you wake up and sit, you are in Treta Yuga. Sorry, yeah, that's right. If you are wake up and sit, you are in Dwapar Yuga. If you stand up, you are in a Treta Yuga. If you start walking, meaning doing action, activity, karma, then you are in a Satya Yuga. Stay in a Satya Yuga. Charayaveti, Charayaveti, Charayaveti. Keep walking, keep walking, keep walking. That's the philosophical definition. Charak Samhita also gives a different philosophical definition. Because of time, I will not go into that. Daivi and Asuri Pravritti, if you remind me in the question answer session, and if you have a time, I'll tell you a story. Okay, so the Daivi Pravritti and Asuri Pravritti and how they coincide, how close or away from each other they stay, that can lead to a certain philosophical definition of a yuga and so on. Okay, and then same Charaka Samhita, for example, I will say it because you'll see how that applies to a very personal, individual, specific person. It says when you are young, Balya, that is a Satya Yuga. When you are youth, like when you become youth, that is the Treta Yuga. When you are a Prauda, okay, like between say 20 to 40, it gives exactly the years and whatnot. Then you are into Dwapar Yuga. And when you become old and then finally death, that is Kali Yuga. Okay, these are the definitions from Charak Samhita. And quickly, administration, I must emphasize, Mahabharata gives that definition. And even you see that reference in Ramayana. Raja Kalasya Karanam. The king, depending on his behavior and his administration, brings a certain type of a yuga. Has nothing to do with a chronological yuga. And therefore, in Mahabharata, you see when Bhishma was ruling, when Chitravirya, Vichitravirya were young, he was ruling so beautifully, he brought Kruta Yuga. Now we know that it was a Dwapar Yuga based on the Mahabharata descriptions. When Parshurama got rid of miscreants, he established Kruta Yuga. That's what Mahabharata says. Ramayana says when Rama started ruling and Rama Rajya, he brought Kruta Yuga. He brought Kruta Yuga in a Treta Yuga. All right. So I spoke enough on this. Okay. How much empirical evidence we have? We have lots and lots of evidence. Quickly, I'm going to walk you fast through this. If you look at just the Mahabharata, my Mahabharata work, I started with that one enigmatic observation that I told you. It gave me these bounds, told me the Mahabharata war must happen. No ifs, no buts between those 2 dates. But that's not the only evidence. I told you there is a 300 plus evidence. Then I looked at Bhishma Nirvana evidence. It gave me another bound. I looked at some additional evidence, gave me another bound, overlapping bounds. Looked at all the planetary descriptions, 35 plus. And all that points to that one specific year, 5561 BCE. Okay, I'm going to skip this. These were some astronomy simulations that I would have shown you, but let me skip that for now. Okay. Now, as I said, I started with astronomy for Mahabharata, but then I found all these different fields of hard sciences, and the evidence, if it exists, it supports, in a scientific term, is corroborates that 5561 BC for the year of Mahabharata war. And just to name some of the fields: oceanography, this is related to Dwarka flooding; geology, seismology related to Dwarka flooding; archaeology, hydrology, the rivers that we talked about; climatology, okay, the monsoon, the temperature changes, whatnot; agriculture, many people wonder where is the agriculture; paleobotany, paleontology, other ancient narratives like Ramayana, whatnot; genealogy, genetics, physical anthropology, linguistics, Rigveda, you name it. It supports this. Okay. This one, I'll go fast through this. Out of those 300 astronomy references from Valmiki Ramayana that I referred to, I'll quickly show you 6. Even they nail it down, the Ramayana times to 13 millennium BC. I'm going to go fast through this, okay? You can watch my other YouTube videos to get into the details. This is the time of Rama Janma, okay? Chaitra Shukla Navami, and the descriptions of Valmiki Ramayana are such that it was the time of the Sharat season, like the fall season, okay? Iti Bruvandamudita Pratyanandana Nrupanrupam Vrishtimantam Mahamegam Nardanta Iva Barhina. The peacocks are dancing and there are clouds. Think of India's atmosphere in August, September, okay? That will give you the flavor. Or it is telling you at the Hemanta Rutu where the sun is setting, which nakshatra is near the sun. It says Nivrutta Akasha Shayana Pushyanita Himaruna. Sun is setting near nakshatra Pushya at the time of Hemanta Rutu, which is what we just passed. December 21st, Hemanta Rutu ended. It takes you to 13th millennium BCE. Or if you look at the Ashada reference to summer solstice, or if you look at the pole stars, the brightest pole stars in our history, okay, they were the pole stars during Ramayana times, and the descriptions for both the pole stars come in the Valmiki Ramayana. Or the fact that the month of Ashwin, now when we do the Vijayadashmi or Dashahara, right, it comes in September, October timeframe, which is what? Sharat season, fall season. Valmiki Ramayana is saying the month of Ashwin occurred during the spring season. Okay, Vayam Ashwayuje Masi Kalasankhya Vyavastita. That Ashwayuje is Ashwin Mas. And when that description is given, it was the time of a spring season. Okay, I'll go fast through that. Ramayana also, beyond astronomy, you find a lot of references. Quickly, I want to give you a summary of it. So Mahabharata Ramayana, you can see that going to 7,500 years ago or 14,000 years ago. Rigveda going back to like 24,000 years, that river 22,000 BC reference I said. But do we have a support for this from all other disciplines? Absolutely. The river Saraswati gives us a wonderful reference to us. Astronomy texts give us reference. They tell us they are old, very, very old. Same thing with genetic evidence that is just pouring in and pouring out. It continues to support many multiple outward migrations out of India for last 60, 70,000 years, okay? Okay. Same thing with agriculture. People say, but where is the agriculture? Well, many people don't know. There are peer-reviewed papers which talk of agriculture in India, okay, in Indian subcontinent, going back to 16,000 BC, going back to 43,000 BC, at least harvesting of grains and storage of grains and so on. And same thing we can do with the geography. I did a 4-part session on the Sugriva's Atlas. Sugriva describing the world geography in all 4 directions, starting with India, 14,000 years ago, the timing of Ramayana, and how perfectly it matches with what it ought to be, the geography of the world, with the ocean levels being different and so on, 14,000 years ago. If you look at astronomy, you will find, just to take Surya Siddhanta for a minute. Now, when do you repair something? Just like you repair a kitchen or repair a house when it becomes old, okay? The repairs, the updates to Surya Siddhanta, the current copy that we have goes back to up to 17,000 years. I'm just going a bit fast through it. 17,000 years. So those are the updates. So something that requires update, we have to go further back, okay, to show that the civilization existed, okay, the culture existed, and why people needed astronomy. People need astronomy for good agriculture, a reliable agriculture, and also reliable navigation. And that's why India was a super rich place. And I'm not talking of just 14,000 years and thousands of years ago, but 2 World Bank folks wrote books. If you have heard that, I'm trying to think of a name. Byron and Angus Madison. Okay, so first Byron wrote, the Belgian, the Flemish guy. And then the report was not believed because it said 50% plus of GDP was due to China and India. So here people did not believe that. So they commissioned Angus Madison. And when Angus Madison did, actually he went back for 2000 years to Roman times. And he found, as he went back, even the scenario for the richness and prosperity of India and China was even a lot better than what people had imagined. Well, much of that prosperity was indeed due to navigation, agriculture, commerce, and whatnot. And you need a good astronomy to do that if you want to navigate around the globe, both southern and northern hemispheres. Indians were phenomenally aware of the southern hemispheres, by the way, guys. Okay, so that's what these texts tell us. If you look at a simple, humble Ganesha's Vahan, domestic mouse. Now, this is not a chart drawn by me. Okay, this is a Bonhomie paper, 2007, I think. If you look at, there are many varieties of domestic mouse, broadly 3 or 4 different varieties. But if you start genetically start looking at where is their ancient home, okay, where they started their journey, as you can see from the arrows, it goes to India. And what's the big deal about the mouse, the domestic mouse? The big deal is the domestic mouse is directly tied to agriculture, a settled civilization, a settled culture. And so naturally they moved away when the Indians moved outside. Definitely first as a migration, simple migration, going out, going to other lands, but also eventually with commerce and navigation and whatnot. Okay. Now, I showed you up to 24,000 years. There is so much to read on this page. I don't want you to spend time. But what I want to tell you, this is a map drawn by and it's her work, Mrs. Rupa Bhatti, one of my co-researchers. Essentially, she has created a template. Everything that is written here is not validated by multiple different disciplines of science. No, that is something we are working on. And just please understand the amount of effort, time, money, resources that it takes to do this. Okay. But what she has done essentially is created a beautiful template based on something substantial from our ancient Indian narratives. Maybe it's a Ramayana, maybe it's a Mahabharata, maybe it's a Purana, maybe it's a Upanishad, maybe it's a Rigveda. And right now, the way we see it, it's still conjectural. Okay, some of the parts are speculative. We easily see some aspects of our civilization, culture, technology, science, astronomy, going back to 200,000 plus years, 2 lakhs years, and possibly more. Okay, so just wanted to share that with you. All right, so now what are you going to do? I'm almost done. Okay, so now you listen to this. I know I went fast and there was too much to process and too much to digest, but the video would be available. Also, think of this as a movie trailer. Okay, just give you some, hopefully it made you curious. And hopefully this leads you to watch my videos, read my blogs, read my books, and not just my books, but there are many other Indic researchers, original Indic researchers. Not many, but there are few. And I want you to read their works also. But now here is the dilemma, right? So what do? I mean, tomorrow morning, do you start telling people? Well, it's up to you, how confident you feel. You can accept it, what I shared. So if there is a one takeaway, I would say you should able to tell anyone that you meet. If someone asks you how old is the Hindu civilization, you should very comfortably able to say definitely more than 24,000 years. And if you cannot articulate why so, you can always say, well, there is this person Nilesh, go ask him. Okay, or if you don't agree, he's always ready to have a on-camera, uncut, unedited, open debate. Okay, assuming the other party has some qualifications and they do have their own claim. If they don't have a claim, I'm not interested. Okay. But what you can do, or anyone can do, anyone who is listening, you can accept it on a Shraddha and share it with others. Okay, that's possible. But I don't want you to stop there, nor there is a need for anyone to stop there. In fact, that's what I love. For example, if you don't agree with this, great, better. Okay, in which case, what I want you to do is that study my works through blogs, books, and videos, and be convinced. So it will take some effort, swadhyaya and intellect, prajna, and do it. Even better, if you don't agree with it, that's better. Critique it. That's our Indian tradition, guys. Sanatana nitya nutana. It's a tradition of a vada. It's a tradition of a discussion. That's what you see. All our ancient narratives are always a dialogue, dialogue between two people or multiple people. Critique it brutally and logically, okay? Write your works, okay? That will require tapasya. Even better, you can come up with a better date. My claim is that 5561 BC for Mahabharata, 12,209 BC for Ramayana are the best claim available today among all the claims that are available, bar none. No ifs, no buts. But I am not attached to them. If somebody can come tomorrow and tell me why this is wrong and why there is a better claim, And if they can convince me, or they can convince based on scientific acumen, logical reasoning, just like Kepler convinced why his theory is better than Copernicus. Copernicus convinced why his theory is better than Ptolemy, or Newton convinced why his is better than Kepler, or Einstein convinced why his is better than Newton. In that fashion, I'm saying, then I will be the most happy person to give up my claim, and whatever that better claim is, I'll start talking about it. So present, alternate, and superior claims, it will be a service, it will be a seva to our civilization, to our dharma. Okay, and of course you'll find the fifth category who don't want to do anything. Okay, and the samshayatma that we talked about, or the people of a very tamasi mindset, they won't do anything, they will only ask questions and nothing else. Very politely I tell them, get lost, take a hike. Okay, all right, so that's my last slide. If you are interested in my books, if you are in India, you can buy those through Subbu publications online, you can buy them. If you are outside India, all of them are available on Amazon in paperback and Kindle. I would encourage you to buy them in paperback because they are not a light reading. Many of them read multiple times, by the way, guys, okay, multiple times. And they tell me every time they get new insights, and the insights never stop. But it's not a easy reading or a light reading, okay, that is for sure. Having said that, let me also tell you, some of you may not believe, but that remains a fact. People who are in the age group of 7 and 10 and 12 and 17 and 23, all the way to 86 and 92, that's the range of data I have. People have read in this group and have understood. Many moms tell me that it is their kids who are 7, 10, 12, 17 who explain these concepts to them, to the parents. Okay, so it is possible in principle. And just quickly, what I'm working on, what I just told you, that whole Saraswati civilization, Saraswati river's history, I'm using that as a template, as a framework to create a template for the history of Hindu civilization as more and more research comes in and we fill in the blanks. Okay, there are many blanks. And keep in mind, we will not know everything about our civilization ever. Okay, that's just not possible. In fact, what we know about Mahabharata is what is there in the Mahabharata text. But we must be confident that there is a lot more that happened during the Mahabharata, which even did not make it to the Mahabharata text. Okay, that's true for everything. All right, so I want to stop on this. I'm going to stop sharing. And let's open up for questions, comments, objections, and all that fun.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Nilesh, for that illuminating and quite a revolutionary research that you have done. Um, Actually, this is the last session of the day, so you could have taken extra time. We were just trying to put that in the chat, so you're not rushed.
Okay.
But maybe we can cover, especially the 2 slides on the framework, because that is of personal interest to me. But I'm more of an activist. See, my my personal mission is to take this, what you and actually others have material have produced, and I want to do something to challenge the establishment. And with this, you have given more material and more ammo, and of course you are already doing almost all the fighting out there. So I think um, that 2 slides are very important because that explains the framework. But I have not seen that elsewhere. That's why maybe we can organize some other session.
Sure.
Sometimes,
And I will send you, and Rajivji, whatever slides,
right.
anything that you see here or anywhere else that I'm presenting, if you need it anytime, just shoot me an email and I'll send it to you.
Every slide could be a 1-hour session of
True.
yours.
That is a fact, actually.
Right,
Thank you.
right. So we'll just go with the question and answer that the audience has. So I have turned on the ability to unmute yourself. So go ahead, unmute yourself, ask the question, and then mute yourself back, please.
Right. And it's and if you are comfortable, I mean, those people asking question, open your video too. I mean, it just makes it more personal connection. But if you are not comfortable, that's okay too.
Right.
Okay, Dharmendraji, you have a question?
Nilesh, thank you so much for your talks. In fact, I keep watching your videos. One fundamental question that I have. because I often get into this issue of explaining the time. Is the length of time, Dakshana, Ahoratra, and all that, is it different for different yugas? Because I see the references of Rama's age. He lived for 11,000 years in the scriptures. And so if you can shed some light over there, is it different or is it same across yugas?
Okay. The answer is, Bhagavad-Gita, I mean, I was just using a metaphor. When Arjun asked a question to Krishna, like the beginning of a third chapter, he says, Krishna, so you are telling me that the Buddhi Yoga, is better than the Karma Yoga. But then you are still asking me to fight. What is this, And Krishna never gives a straight answer. That's why it's called Murare's Tritiya Pantha. Krishna's Murare's path is the third path. It's not this or that, not black and white. The reason we say Murare's Tritiya Pantha, jokingly, of course, we say that because our Indian, Hindu Dharma, I wouldn't want to call it religion, is not simplistic. It's not black and white. It's not, so that same answer will apply. So you ask, is it a different? The answer is yes and no. I'll tell you what the yes is. Remember when I showed you that timeline, there is a physiological time, okay? There is a psychological time, and then there is a space-time. Okay, the space-time is what? Right now, if we use a smartphone, what you will measure, what I will measure will be identical, okay? At least here on the Earth. The psychological time, if you have heard Einstein's quote, and actually he performed the experiment, I'll not go into the detail. He said, if you are sitting with a beautiful girl, lady, whatever it is, for an hour, it feels like a minute. On the other hand, if you're sitting on a hot plate for a minute, it feels like an hour. And actually, he performed the experiment. He published that in a Journal of Exothermic Sciences 1938 paper. Believe it or not, do you know who he hired for that beautiful lady? Charlie Chaplin's wife. He borrowed her for an hour to have a date in an oyster bar in a New York City. That's a sidebar. So yes, in that sense, the psychological time, it can be different. Now let's come to the Rama. In Valmiki Ramayana, we get this description that Rama ruled for 11,000 years. Or we also get a description that Dashrath was 60,000 years old. Okay, and many others, even Ramayana or other places, then he did tapasya for 10,000 years, he did tapasya for 100,000 years, 12,000 years, so on and so forth. Many ways to understand it, but many of our great acharyas, and I'm saying great acharyas of last 400, 500, 1,000, 1,500 years, have explained that. For example, just like I say, and I didn't have a time to describe, but even that bottom right-hand corner of chronology, that also has many definitions. That has 30, 50 definitions. In fact, right now, the WAVES International Conference is going on, and next weekend, you will see one panel discussion on chronology. And please do attend, those of you who can. And there is one wonderful researcher, a retired IPS officer, Arun Upadhyayji. And he has accumulated all these different chronological definitions of yoga. But one of the definition is called, and you might have heard this, Dharmendraji, Ahareva Samvatsara, which means, depending on the context, you can take 1 year as equal to 1 day or vice versa. So now if you take that, like say 10,000 years or 11,000 years of Rama's ruling as referring to 1 year as a 1 day, that comes to like 30 years. And then suddenly it starts making sense. Okay. So we have to apply the definition in the context. Now, why that is given as 11,000, I don't know honestly the answer, but there are more intelligent people and more realized people like many acharyas who have given those explanations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah, next, I think somebody asked in the chat. Yeah, please ask the next question. Just unmute yourself and turn your video on so that we can see you. D.A. Aruri, yeah.
Okay, who is asking now? Vandanaji, are you asking the question?
I'll ask a question. I have seen, and in a tweet and other places also, there was a comparison between the Vishnu avatars and Darwin's evolution. Do you want to show some light on it, please?
Thank you. So What about the Darwin's evolution and
There is some similarity, it says.
Yeah. No, I'm not asking you what about it. No, I'm just saying the people are say, is there any parallel? Is there any relationship?
Relationship,
Yeah.
right.
Okay. Now, if there is a relationship in the sense of did Darwin looked at the Vishnu's 10 avatar and felt inspired, we don't have a historical evidence for it. But based on my experience, I'll tell you. So therefore, I'm not claiming that Darwin therefore actually found this from Vishnu avatar. I don't know that. But you will find that many of the inspirations for the scientific theories of today actually came from ancient metaphors, the Greek metaphors, Indian metaphors, and so on. And there is actually a trail that you can follow. For example, when Copernicus came up with, now there is also theory, and I believe that Copernicus also got the knowledge stolen from India via Arabs and whatnot. But even if we keep that aside, just purely from a Greek point of view, the Greeks believed that sun is the chief celestial entity and everything kind of rotates around it. I mean, there were few folks, who had proposed a solar center model. Now that model was already existing, and that model sort of at some point somebody picked that model, and so Copernicus might have picked up. Similarly, it won't be surprising, we don't have evidence, but it won't be surprising if we find out that Darwin was inspired by this Matsya Kurma Varaha Nrsimha and tried to put it that way. Although we don't have evidence in this case, we have evidence in many cases where the origin of many of the frameworks used in the Western corporate world or otherwise came from ancient wisdom. For example, if you think of a Myers-Briggs, like personality profile in a corporate world, you'll be amazed to know the Indian connection of Myers and Briggs working. They influenced by Carl Jung, and Carl Jung in turn influenced by Indian wisdom.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, next. Yeah, you can unmute yourself before asking the question.
Okay, who wants to go next? Raviji?
Yeah, namaskar, Nilesh ji.
Namaskar.
Namaskar, Rajiv ji. Thank you for holding this session. And I do follow Nilesh ji for his work, tremendous work, excellent, giving a lot of information, not just information, but a lot of ground to people who want to work and propagate our Sanatana Dharma. So thank you very much. I have two questions. One is, one probably I don't know whether you will be able to answer or not, but I'll still ask. Maybe you'll shed some light. Every timekeeping in the modern context, right, is based upon the number of years, month, and whatnot, and history goes back because of this timekeeping only. Though we have multiple calendars, right? So as we know that we were advanced in astronomy and many other sciences, why we don't have a common calendar that can take us back to all these yugas?
Okay, I will just give an answer metaphorically first, and then in a fragmentary fashion. If you look at the evidence of Mahabharata text, just a pure astronomy evidence, 300 plus specific astronomy descriptions. Okay, and if you see in my two books, like the When Did the Mahabharata War Happen, where I had like 200 plus observations, and then by the time I wrote Bhishma Nirvana 2018, I have additional 100 plus, so it's now 300 plus. If someone has even a basic sense of what science is or scientific acumen is and a common sense logical reasoning, okay, I'm not saying this because it is I came up with the claim of 5561 BC, and fortunately more and more people around the world, okay, Indians and non-Indians are coming to those terms with those dates. But you will see also the resistance, and the resistance is not coming from Western individuals. The resistance is coming from very much Indian folks, very dharmic folks. In a directional sense, they are dharmic folks, pro-India interest at hand. But what policy they take? See, there are different reasons. Maybe they have their own date, and now to accept another date, which is more scientifically proven and whatnot, they feel wrongly, they feel as if that's like falling on their face. In science, there is nothing like that. In fact, in the Dharma, there is nothing like that. Okay. I mean, we can make mistakes. Okay. And the Nyaya Darshana explains very well why we make errors. He says, Pravartana Lakshana Dosha, and he says, Raga Dvesha Moha. Okay. Due to attachment to a particular outcome, due to hate or detest for another outcome, or stupidity. So you decide every time there is a variation. Same thing happens with our calendars. So I'll tell you what some of the initiative that I took. I've single-handedly worked on this for 8 years to work with some Panchanga maker in India who will first feel convinced of my research, because then at least they can collaborate with me. But if they're not convinced, that's okay. And then we come together and remove some of the errors, some of the challenges that we have with existing calendars. It took me 8 years, 2012 to 2020. Okay. And once that connection happened, one of the oldest Panchanga maker tradition in India, 100 plus years of family tradition. And now, I don't know if you're on the Twitter, but on Twitter, if you go at Date Panchang, Date Panchang, that is their last name of that family.
Date, yes, yes.
Yeah, and so we have this. It's just a template right now. We are working on the app, but to do everything, we need experts, time, money, resources, money, everything is required. So eventually, it will happen. That particular calendar, I would say, get rid of the errors, problems, challenges that exist in the next best calendar. So if next best calendar has certain errors, and what we are proposing or what we are using right now, the errors are gone at least 70 to 80% from the next best calendar. So now my point is that calendar exists, but what we need to do, I mean, it's my job now to educate people on calendar. I understand, but one person has a limitation. But people will still stuck with their own calendars, and I'm not blaming anyone. I understand the reason. Sometimes they will remain stuck because that's their family tradition. Others, it's a certain sampradaya tradition. Third one is a certain ashram tradition. Fourth is a certain guru tradition. So we can still have these. Okay, we can still have these, but we can also go beyond it, because sometimes you have to compromise. You have to bring something together. Like if you go to the Badarayana's the what you call Brahma Sutra, the fourth sutra is what? Tattu Samanvayat. To do the Samanvay, Shankaracharya had to do that, which means there will be some cutting involved. There will be some trimmings.
Of course.
And if we are not ready for a trimming, we as an individual, whatever tradition we belong to, and we say, no, accept what I have done, and that is it, then nothing will go forward. So that remains a challenge. But I see a consensus building. I see the people seeing the limitations, and that is not to stop others from using whatever calendars they are using. But we can see all of us, okay, all the Hindu Dharmi. If I ask you, and I'm not going to ask you, Raviji, but if I ask you what year you are born, immediately the number you're going to throw out is actually a Gregorian calendar. There is no reference to Hindu calendar whatsoever, right? But that we will agree. But if we have to agree on what we have built right now, and that is on the Twitter right now, is we have reintroduced the Indian solar months. They exist in Taittiriya Samhita. You will not find them practically in any of the existing calendars. We introduce them. Therefore, per Indian solar month, we can have a 32 days in a solar month or 29 days in a solar month, not the way these guys do it. So it is possible to do it. It is possible. It needs will and willingness.
So just a follow-up question, and I have one more question if I'm allowed, Rajiv ji.
Yeah, sure.
Like, as you correctly said that my date of birth is now Gregorian calendar, but if I go to my Kundli, Janam Kundli, so it has a hint or a calculated date, month and year, right? And that year can go as back as the age of calendar. So in that particular calendar, my age and the date of my birth can be specified and calculated. This is how this much old I am, right?
Yeah.
So is that kind of data available in our text when we go and look into Rama and Krishna, and what kind of calendar were they using, and how can we calculate that thing? Is that very difficult? I just want to understand this.
Yeah.
And before you answer, let me just add in my question so that I don't take much time. Why don't we have a national museum of history that uses our own history and propagate it? If we consider that our history to be true, what is stopping us as a Sanatani people and our government to put that on focus? Why can't we have our own history and that tells all these timelines and things?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Great. I'll start with your second question. I wish I had a crystal ball to explain why we are not doing, as a Sanatanis and this and that. So no, I don't know the answer. I mean, whatever the concern you have or whatever the wish you have, I have the same wish, as far as that is concerned. But let me come to the first couple of things. The reason when your birth date is stated and you can actually go back and track that specific date if you have to make a horoscope and whatnot, is because the Gregorian calendar that we are using is a purely solar calendar. Okay, and let's not be part of this what you call conspiracy that people say, oh, Gregorian calendar is a useless. No. Actually, for certain aspect, not all aspect, Gregorian calendar is a very well built now. They built it based on an Indian wisdom. Just let me tell you that. Okay, they had no clue. So in 1600, 1500, they have a gap of like 40 days or so in their calendar. So now it's a decent calendar for certain purposes, not for all purposes. Now, what kind of calendars existed in our ancient times? Lots of different calendars existed in our ancient times. Okay, you can see very indirect descriptions in Mahabharata and Ramayana. Now, when I say indirect description, this is what I mean. If you read even today, although that's a fiction, but let's say you read the Vinci Code, okay, and then whatever that Professor Langdon, and so the description says, oh, he went to Boston airport, took a flight and flew to London. Now that doesn't give all the descriptions of how the plane flew. That doesn't give a description of which engine it was, which equipment it was, right? Same thing. But we know if the book has that, more than likely there was a plane, there was a airline industry and whatnot. Same thing, there are enough references in our both Itihasa and also other texts that we know that there were many calendars. Okay, Margashirsha was the first month of one of the many calendars, one of the many, more than likely the prominent calendar in the Mahabharata times, and you have a descriptions of that right in the Mahabharata. It has a description right in the Bhagavad-Gita. Those of you who have Bhagavad-Gita by heart, Masanam Margashirsha Yam Rutuna Kusumakara. Why Masanam Margashirsha? Okay, or Nakshatrana Maham Shashi. So the indirect references comes. Now quickly to answer your question, what kind of information they embedded in these Itihasa? They did not use the bottom right hand corner of that chronology that I mentioned to put the dates into Mahabharata or Ramayana. If Vyasadeva or Valmiki would have done that, I would not have been able to determine the timing of Mahabharata and Ramayana. Because the reference that we have, let's say you are born in 1970, whatever that year is, I'm not making you older, by the way, just I'm picking a number, okay? Whatever that year is, we right now understand the significance that it is a Gregorian calendar, but 5,000 years from now, it may be lost. On the other hand, the way Vyasadeva or Valmiki embedded the information of their times in these Itihasa, Ramayana and Mahabharata it's in such a fashion that even 5,000 years from now, suppose all the knowledge that we have is lost, but still the Mahabharata Ramayana is preserved. Someone like Nilesh Oak, 5,000 years down the road, will look at it and will again arrive at that particular time, 5561 BC or that equivalent. That is the beauty. That is how they embedded.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I have a
Thank you. Yeah.
related to the calendar. On December 20th, I saw a post of Ankit Sinha in which he was actually mentioning there's on the 21st of this December, a yuga is starting, a new yuga is starting. Do you know anything like that?
Okay, no, I don't know about what specifically Ankit Sinha is saying. But just because you said December 21st, let me just use that as a point. to give you one additional definition of a yuga. Actually, there are 30, 40 different definitions of yuga. I just described 4 categories. I did not describe specific definition. But one of the definition, many people will love to know that actually 1 year can have 1 yuga or can have 4 yuga. 1 year. Okay. And those descriptions are there. For example, it says when sun becomes the slowest, okay, sun's motion as seen from the earth, not the daily motion, okay, its movement with respect to nakshatra, when it becomes the slowest, that is a Kali. In fact, and now what I'm going to say is like, you might go over somebody's head, but many people will love it. In the sky, we think of a Kala Purusha. How many of you have heard that? There is a Kala Purusha in the sky. And anyone knows what that nakshatra is? It's the dancing Shiva, the Nataraja, the Orion, the Mrugashirsha, the nakshatra Mrugashirsha and Ardra. If people are from Tamil Nadu, the Ardra festival, that Ardra full moon festival that they do and so on. That's a Nataraja. That is the location where sun becomes the slowest as seen from the earth. And that fact has remained that way for last 100,000 years. That is why it's a Kali, meaning the slowest, Kala Purusha. Now, immediately people will not digest that or quickly absorb it. But that much meaning is embedded in all our metaphors, all our iconography, all our deities. So Nataraja is dancing, it's just not for some fun. The Nataraja dancing, Nitya Nartana, that is how the Shiva is described in Shiva Sahasranam in the Mahabharata. I don't know how many people knew that. And Krishna is saying it, by the way. So yeah, we have these metaphors embedded in it, and deciphering them takes time. And so we have lost a lot, but still whatever is existing, there is a lot more to be gained. So I don't know if I answered your question. I'm saying anyone can start anything. I think the question that ma'am you asked, Vandana ji, is more relevant for that whatever Mr. Sinha who came up with it. You said, okay, what's your rationale for starting a yuga from 21st December?
I really want to share that information with you if it's possible.
Yeah, that's fine. But again, no, and you may share that. But also remember the very first slide, what I showed you,
Yes.
and a Sandigdha. Like, you want to ask that question that solves some big problem. Because otherwise, every Dick and Harry can get up and start another calendar or another yuga. That doesn't mean much. Remember the yuga, the world is always ending, 2012 and now 2024 and whatnot. We have to stay away from such things also. I'm not saying Mr. Sinha is doing that. I don't know about him. Okay, thank you. So let's go to the next one.
Hello, my name is Chandra. I have a question. Hello.
Hold on. One minute. So Daruri was there for a while. So let him ask first, then we will go to Chandraji.
Sure.
Thank you. Rajivji, thank you for the opportunity. Nileshji, I've been following your presentations and YouTube channel. Very impressive. Very impressive. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. So my question is, how do we ensure that the time difference between yugas is not cycles? Because, we are in a cyclic, the pole star, especially the pole star, you have described, and I have, pictorially followed that circle because of the 23.5 degrees, rotation. The pole star keeps moving. So between yugas, let's say, we are in Kali Yuga now, and whatever when Rama's time was there, that pole star might have been 17,000 years ago, whatever, I'm just taking that number. How can we ensure that that's not multiple cycles between yugas? But the reason I bring this up is I've learned from my grandfather, who says that the time gap between the two avatars, which is Nrsimha Avatara and Rama Avatara, is multiple yugas. So I didn't find any, texts or anything which describe that. However, there is a larger section of, Vedic, believers that there is multiple yugas that have passed between these two. So why not we apply similar concept into the dating of our yugas? If we consider, why are we, is there any way we can eliminate that possibility of these are consecutive? That's question number one.
Yeah, no,
question about...
no, hold on, because actually you already asked two questions, whether you realized it or not. Okay, all right. No, and then you can ask next question, but let me clarify that. So one is, why not use that concept of a multiple yugas to dating? Okay, that is the first question. I would say, fine, if somebody feels that they can use it, okay, and meaningfully come to a conclusion that can be validated by other evidence and so on, be my guest. I'm not against it at all. Okay, so that's number one. So the second question was, how can that multiple yugas may fit between the two avtaras? That was between Narasimha and something that you asked, or Parshurama. Think of it, I just described the yuga into 4 quadrants. I did not get into specific definitions of yuga. But if you just come back to either the top right hand corner or top bottom corner, okay, if you can visualize that, the cosmological cycles or a very short cycles. It's like thinking of like a year is also one way of measuring, month is also a way of measuring, and then days and hours and minutes and seconds. These are different magnitudes. So think of it like that. So the cosmological cycles, 4.32 million years I referred to, which is really meant not for measuring time, but it was meant to know the accurate and precise orbital periods of the planets, which eventually will be used for different purposes. Okay. Similarly, the yuga, we have many definitions, and therefore I would again ask people to watch the next week's Waves International Conference, the panel discussion on chronology, okay, where Arun Upadhyayji talks of few definitions, and I have my blogs written on it, basically taking Arun Upadhyayji's data. Okay, so yuga, just like Vandana ma'am just said, yuga can be 1 year or not. She did not say that, but somebody is starting a yuga. New yuga started 21st December, just 2 days ago, right? So there is a yuga that can happen in 1 year. One yuga can happen in 5 years. One yuga can happen in 12 years. 95 years, 1,000, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, 12,000, 21,000, 26,000. These are all different definitions of yuga. So now when you're saying certain yugas occurred, or your grandpa said between, say, certain avatar and certain avatar, what needs to be found out is which yuga definition was used to say there were multiple yugas between those.
Okay,
until we figure that out, we will always be in a limbo. It will be a problem of two unknowns. Two unknowns and one answer.
Yeah.
Okay, your next question, and then we will go back to the next one.
Yeah, the next question was, according to some Gujarat, they follow the new year as Kartik, Kartika Masa.
Yeah.
And, now that has been shifted to, April timeframe to Lord Sri Rama's, birth date.
Right.
So, how can we kind of get into a context of, yugas and the time to justify that change? And
okay, so let's take that. So say Rama's birth time, right? Rama's birth time is Chaitra Shukla Navami.
Yeah.
Okay. Right now it occurs when? It occurs in Chaitra Shukla Navami, that is there, but the season is actually the second month of Vasanta Rutu right now. For that, we don't need to go to bigger yugas. We can go through one cycle of the precession of the Earth's axis, which is a 26,000 years, and it will solve the problem. Okay. So, for example, so right now we celebrate because we stick to Chaitra Shukla Navami, and that's perfectly fine. It occurs in the second month of Vasanta Rutu. But if you read Valmiki Ramayana, that's a motivation for everyone here to read Valmiki Ramayana with the translation. You will find when the Chaitra months come, multiple definitions. Okay, the descriptions these are all descriptions of a Sharad Rutu, and I read one today. When I showed that diagram on this. Okay, the peacocks are dancing, or Chaitram Sri Manayam Masa Punya Pushpita Kanana. Full of flowers and very soothing and very pleasant atmosphere and so on. Many references. And Ashwin month is shown as the Vasanta Rutu. Vayam Ashwayuje Masi Kala Sankhya Vyavastita. So what happened there? That switch took place, that shift took place because of the precession of the Earth's axis. And so we can exactly find out how far back we have to go. Actually, that's how I started my research on the Chaitra. So I said, at least, the earliest, the latest time but that far back I must go, like a lower limit on the timing of Ramayana, is definitely 10,000 BC for all these reasons. So it changes. So now our challenge is, how do we celebrate? Do we celebrate according to season? Do we celebrate according to lunar month and a tithi? We have to pick something. And we have decided to pick Chaitra Shukla Navami, and that's perfectly fine. For celebration purposes, that's perfectly fine.
Good, good. Thank you, and all the best for the next endeavors.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Next.
Hi, in a time context, how would you relate our Gotra to the time context from a past and future perspective?
Okay, can you, Rajeshji, can you repeat the question again?
In a time context and the Gotra concept, how would you relate it to the past and to the future with relating to modern human, or all humans, I would say?
Okay, so I understood the time. What was the other one? Gotra?
Gotra concept. Because now we are losing Gotra concept very rapidly in the modern world. So how would you relate that to that?
Okay, the Gotra as in like, my Gotra is a Vasishta Rishi and something like that, Vasishta and Bharadwaj. Okay, so the Gotra directly does not have anything to do with the time, okay, the time concept. But because, I don't think that Gotra has any relevance to whatever we are discussing related to chronology or time. All I will quickly mention by way of Gotra, the Gotra can come for multiple reasons, but at least the two reasons is, it can be because it's a genetic succession, or it can be a disciplic succession, which is to say, the son will inherit the Gotra of a father. Okay. And in case of ladies, we say, whichever family they marry into, until they are married, they have the Gotra of a father, and then the Gotra of a husband, and so on. And we are, in India, we do have a matriarchal traditions, and I don't know exactly what they do there. But the point is, the Gotra can be due to a genetic succession, meaning the Gotra of a father, but it can also be due to disciplic succession, because Gotra of a guru, and so on. So sometimes it is taken for a reference purposes, but no direct connection with the time or chronology or the history that we are discussing. If you are saying, Rajesh,
okay,
you are on the mute.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Does
you.
that answer your
we have
question?
one more question by Chandra. Chandra, it's your turn now. So
yeah.
Okay.
Ahead,
Yeah, sure.
Thank you for waiting, Chandraji. Sorry, somebody else.
No,
Few people went.
no, that's fine. Thank you, Nilesh. So one only question. I know we speak about, you spoke about Shiva, and many also speak in terms of him being the Adi Yogi at the origin. But when you read some Rigvedic texts and hymns and all, I mean, I've not written it, I've not read in its entirety, but mostly that relates to Rudra, one of the demigods within that era or that book. And when did that morph over to that trinity of being Shiva, between Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva, like that? And are they both the same, or is it just that evolution of that understanding? That is my question.
No, I understood the question. Again, what I'm going to tell is my 2 cents. Okay, so take it for whatever beneficial they are. I mean, my wife asked me, my wife is a Devi Bhakta, and she asked me that, I mean, jokingly, but say, who is the highest, and, I said, well, I don't want to fight inside the house, so the Devi is the highest. Okay. So depending on the circumstances, you may give an answer. Well, what happens is, see, these all things are used. These are, by the way, very fluid, and they're used in a metaphorical sense. Okay. Now people can give different interpretation also. Sometimes we put them in an extremely rigid fashion. For example, that can happen in a sampradaya. So let's understand for a minute why it happens in a sampradaya. Because we want to have that Shraddha, right? Because we say there are multiple paths within the Dharma tradition, but you pick one, stick to it, do tapasya, stay steady, and you will achieve the destination. So when that is done in a bit of a childish fashion, I would say, not childish, but childlike fashion, just like we give the rules to the children, no chocolate except on Saturday. Now, the bigger principle behind that is very different, right? That the child should not eat too much sugar, or should not eat too much bad food, or, fast food kind of thing. But eventually, if it's not taken in that spirit, it may turn out to be a very blind rule that people don't know why, but they have to follow nevertheless. Same thing can happen with this. So in Rigveda, you will see, but you already answered the question, by the way, in the way you asked the question. So, or is this like a different evolution? Yeah, there is an evolution of these concepts. Okay, just like a concept might be originally devised to solve a certain problem, but that concept might be used in many other places to solve other problems. Like we see that in the business all the time, in medicine, in engineering, and whatnot. Like say, much chemistry was evolved. Evolved during the Second World War time, because Germany was working after all alternate fuels and alternate materials and whatnot. So they did it for the war purposes. But now that I'm a chemical engineer, by the way, so I'm talking of that Ziegler-Natta and whatnot. So that chemistry now becomes useful to us in a many different ways. You can use that same metaphor for our concepts of a deity, like a Rudra, Shiva, Nataraja, Vishnu, Krishna. But in a particular sampradaya, it may be seen in a different way. And if that becomes rigid, then we start getting these kind of conflicts that we may not able to resolve, because it was done for a very specific time, place, and circumstances. Now we are removing that time, place, circumstances and trying to understand it elsewhere. Hopefully that answers, Chandraji.
Right. Thank you. If anybody else does not have a question, I will take that chance.
Okay.
Yeah,
go ahead,
go ahead. Go ahead. Finish. Yeah.
Yeah. So usually in this Dashavatara, I happen to see that description of the 10 avatars and all. I have happened to see varied forms, like from 8 to 10. But for some reason, I don't tend to accept Buddha as part of the Dashavatara. Is it a classic Hindu appropriation from a great man born out of that geographic area, that we accommodated him as part of the Dashavatara and a birth of the Narayana, or how or is this true, or did that happen at all?
Right. So Chandraji, this question is directionally similar to what you asked before, a slightly different answer. But what I'll say is this: for example, not all Hindu tradition accept Buddha as a ninth avatar. For example, just as a way of illustration, if you take the Jayadeva's Gita Govinda, I think I'm saying the name right. Okay, he talks about the ninth avatar as, or even the eighth avatar, by the way, because he puts Krishna as a higher, and then these are all Krishna's avatar. So he put there Balarama, okay, and he may not put Buddha. If you read Bhagavad Puran, instead of 10, you will hear 18 avatar. Okay, Dattatreya, Bhagwan Dattatreya is also avatar there, and so on and so forth. Then if you see other Vaishnava literature, many other grantha, many other Puranas, you will see different types of avatar, such as a Shakta avatar, meaning spirited avatar, Ansha avatar, Purna avatar, and so on and so forth. I'll give you again my 2 cents on it. And again, not everyone has to agree on it, because see, at the end of the day, we have to come up with answers that satisfy us individually. That's required, right? So that we don't have a sambram and we can continue in our sadhana. The way I look at it, I give the example of the word phala hetu. We use that word all the time, and you'll see that in our narratives. Phala hetu. Even look at the sequence, phala hetu. So we see the phala, fruit, the outcome of a certain situation, outcome of certain person's life, individual life, outcome of a certain situation. And then we say, what could be the reason? Hetu. Okay, what could be the reason behind it? And so similarly, when we see some great personalities and they do some extraordinary work, like Krishna is called a Yuga Purush, for example, when they do extraordinary work, and I'm not referring to just Krishna, it can be anyone. So we see their work and we say, this is not humanly possible. That's the language we might use. And we say, oh, then how did he or she manage that? And as a part of our reasoning, we may come and say, oh, he must be an avatar. He must be the God's But Krishna is saying that Mamaivansho Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. Like, we, each one of us is a Ansha, and if we polish ourselves, clean and start shining, then we are like him, maybe still Ansha. So Phala Hetu is the concept I use to understand it. So when somebody becomes great, jokingly I will say, this one person that I go on a show every week, Satyology. Now, see, he calls me Muni. He says great Muni or Rishi. Now, he calling me Muni is fine. Okay, I don't see any problem with that. If I start thinking I am a Muni and therefore I am a great guy, then the problem would begin. So I hope this answers you. This gives you a couple of ways to think about it.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, we are running out of time. Anybody else has any question?
Yes, I have one.
Hetalji, yeah, sure. Go ahead, please.
One quick question. Some people from Jainism, they say that Jainism is older than Hinduism, or even before Sanatana Dharma was born. How true is that, based on your research on timeline?
Okay, great question. Now, I have not done, I'm aware directionally about Jainism, and even Rishabhadev and, those multiple Tirthankars and whatnot. Jainism is very much part of Hinduism, whether, that's not a question of a debate, just like many other things that evolved, including Buddhism in the Indian context. You can think of that as a different sampradaya, but I'm not saying this that they have to agree or anything like this. I'm just saying my understanding of it. Many Jain individuals actually approach me and say, hey, please do some research on based on a Jain text. Now, there are only 24 hours, and so and that's not my expertise either. But to answer your question, I'm going to take you to a intellectual Kshatriyas Shastra and Astra. The name of that Shastra, or Astra rather, is called Hitchin's razor. Who I forgot who asked the question, but have you heard the title name Hitchin's razor before?
No, sorry.
No. Okay, there is a guy who just passed away a few years ago, a brilliant fellow, Christopher Hitchens. He sort of, in the Western context, there are no atheists in a Hindu context, but in a Western context, he's a famous atheist. That's why the goes after his name, Hitchin's razor. And I would encourage everyone to remember this. What it says is this: a claim made without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. Okay, and I'm not saying in a dismissive fashion about Jainism or anything. I have a great respect and what a great principles, the Niti Vichar and whatnot. My point is, anyone claiming, it doesn't matter whether Jain or some professor from Berkeley, or doesn't matter from, anyone claiming something, the person, immediately the question that we need to ask, based on what evidence? Is this empirical? Can it be objectively tested? Can it be logically reasoned with? Can be logically tested? If the answer is yes, we can evaluate that possibility. If Jainism comes out older than, say, Hinduism, let's say, I wouldn't flinch. It would not bother me at all. Why would it bother me? I mean, in fact, any other religion I'm talking, forget Dharma, like Jainism, very much a Dharma tradition, but even some other religion, if they can prove with evidence, objective, empirical, testable evidence that they are older, as some of them try, it wouldn't bother me. So be it. If it's old, it is old.
Sure. Okay.
But there is no, I have not seen any work from the Jainism tradition where I have seen objectively testable evidence of that effect. Now, because I said Jainism is a part of a Sanatana Vedic Dharma in a general sense, you can see the Shramana tradition, for example. The Shramana word you will find in our ancient Indian narratives, the Shramana tradition you will find, and some personalities, the way you see the Tirthankaras they describe, or the Mahavir, Vardhaman Mahavirji himself, a Shramana life, you will see that in our tradition. Like if you read Bhagavad Puran, Jada Bharata, and so on. So if they have derived that inspiration from it, then that is true. In fact, no, I don't know if you know this, but I know that is true for Buddha. Isn't it also true for Vardhaman Mahavir that he is also claimed to be from Ikshwaku dynasty?
Yes.
If he is, then that should solve the problem. Okay, so he is from Ikshwaku dynasty, so definitely Ikshwaku was before him, and Ikshwaku is a son of a Manu, and then it can go on and on.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I believe Murdalaji, you want to ask a question?
Well, my only question was, I could not copy the email for this morning's presentation, and I would also like it for this presentation. So if I can get the slides.
All that will be online. You should be able to. We'll send you a link. Yeah.
Thank you.
Any questions for Nileshji's work? Any more?
No, thank you very much. It was great.
Okay, thank you.
It was great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is it possible to speak to the professor, ask him a question?
Yeah, Mahendraji. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, make it quick.
Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I'm kind of third generation from Porbandar, Gujarati, East Africa to London. And I just wanted to ask you that what we fear most here within the diaspora here is the Tukre gang in present day India. That we feel that until Modi ji came into power, we Hindus have suffered for the last 1,300 years through Islamic invasion, destruction of our temple and our very positive civilization. The British took advantage of and deliberately played tricks with the Vedas, the Upanishads, tried to attach falsehood to various truths. What is, in your opinion, Professor, the future of Sanatana Dharma? I know it's always was, is, and will be in the manifest and the unmanifest, but what do you feel is the future of Bharat? And is there a chance of Akhand Bharat reuniting?
Okay, well, it will not come from we just wishing it. It will come from we working for it. And again, Krishna gives us the formula. So I mean, if you're asking the question, will it happen? Well, I'm eternal optimist. So I will not stop what I do with my limited resources and my own personal challenges until I leave this body and take another one. Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaryam yavanam jara. But we, all of us, have to do it as our swadharma, and it doesn't take much. I'll give you a quick way of metaphor. Swatantraveer Savarkar, you may or may not have heard. I know you are from Africa, but you guys follow and understand history a lot better than Indians in India. You know, so if you have heard of Swatantraveer Savarkar, when he was asked after India won freedom from British 1947, he says, "In your opinion, what was the cause of India's freedom?" And Savarkar said, of course, he listed all the things. He said Satyagraha. He said, Swadeshi movement. He said, what you call the people with weapons fighting against the British, the navies, I mean, everything. He listed all other things. He said they were all responsible for India's freedom. He also listed something, and he gave an emphasis on that. He said, and also thousands and thousands of Indians who otherwise had no specific ability to actively participate into this freedom movement, when they were doing their puja or just doing their prayer, they were praying, these thousands of people, that, hey Bhagwan, let the India win the freedom. And he said that was also part of the main reason why India won freedom, which means the will also matters, the action also matters. And action is a swakarma. Wherever we are, we can do there, in our family, with our neighbor. Sometime being very assertive in a social setting. And by social setting, I don't mean with the Westerners or anything, just even the very Indian setting. Somebody, if I had a time, I would have said that, so I won't go there. Many stories I have. But somebody will say something and you say, chalo jane do, why to fight? So you let go. I don't. As a matter of principle, and I don't get angry or offensive or anything. I said, excuse me, you said this, what is your evidence? And immediately the person said, no, I read somewhere in the newspaper. Then I say, well, do you believe everything you read in the newspaper and start telling people? Don't you have your... So I'm saying, even taking some very, very small actions every day, and even ask that question when we go to the bed, what is that 1 or 2 actions that I took for the Dharma will change this picture. That is just my 2 cents.
Yes, thank you very much for a very comprehensive answer. If I may just add to it, is that do you feel that Islam, which wants to take over not just India but the rest of the world, would succeed in his very demonic way, take over, and therefore, Hinduism and Sanatana Dharma may not be manifested.
Okay.
Do you feel that they might succeed in their evil ways?
Okay. Okay, great. No, I don't know the answer to that question. I can tell you what is my plan, what is my strategy. I want to do everything in my power to not let that happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay, I can only do what I can, right? So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you for asking the question. Venkatji, you have any question?
I think Rajeshji, are you saying something?
A follow-up question. So when we say of Akhand Bharat and we talk of the Tukre gang also taking up, so what is the point in increasing the Tukre gang by having an Akhand Bharat?
Okay, I have to pass. I'm not sure I understood the question.
Let's just focus on Nileshji's work, and
let's
get
stick
into
to what I discussed today.
Right,
and my bad. My apologies. I should have said that.
Thank you, Rajesh. You have a very valid question, but
yes,
perhaps you can pose it tomorrow at plenary session. Okay. Thank you very much. Anybody else, or because it's been a very long time now.
Right.
So Nileshji, thank you very much for sharing your revolutionary work here, and we'll do everything possible to propagate it and we'll have you, of course, depending on your time and availability. But like I said, especially the few slides that you showed, that could be just a whole presentation in itself, because there is so much in it.
It is. And
usually,
Rajivji, usually I would say, if I show a framework,
right.
The way I build frameworks are such that I can explain that in 5 minutes. I can take 1 hour, I can take 1 day, or I can go on that one thing for 5 days.
Right. So I just want to make an announcement here, because many of you have signed up to receive the training in Hindu heritage, these camps and for your Sunday schools. So you have Nileshji's books. You have access to him. If you want to specialize in Hindu history and take Nileshji's work and translate it into the classroom. This is one of the biggest contributions that you can make. I know because I'm seeing the forms, the applications come in. So please consider, if you have signed up as for teacher training, then Hindu history with Nileshji's work as a reference is a subject that you can take up. Okay, and I'll find out if Nileshji is available, and at depending on his comfort level as well. But I'm saying you have all the material. His videos are there, his books are there, and somebody can specialize in that. Okay, great. So thank you for the long day, and we have tomorrow 4 more sessions. The morning one is very, very important, where we put together we present the architecture of Dharma itself in its totality. Please do not miss that. And tomorrow we'll conclude. The camp will conclude by the plenary session, where we'll put the issues that Hindu society faces, and we hope to have all our teachers and presenters back in that. It's at 4 p.m. Chicago time and 5 p.m. New York time, where there will be a panel and where you can pose the larger questions, especially the Hindu society in the US that faces here. I know, like, someone like Nileshji is working on things that are more universal and global, but still, we have to have the defensive mechanism built in here. We have a social studies curriculum that is anti-Hindu to deal with, and then we have this all-pervasive environment that may not be suitable to the growth and propagation of Hinduism here. So be on a lookout for that plenary session tomorrow and 4 more sessions. So Nileshji, thank you very much. Pranam. And it was great to have you here.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody, and we'll join back tomorrow 9 a.m. Chicago time.
Thank you everyone. Jai Shri Ram.
Jai Shri Ram.